As has been the case over the last few weeks, there are a lot of different projects going on, as Arabella has just 4 months to go before launch. The cockpit here is getting many layers of paint, and we'll see that back in the boat shed next episode. This week, while Adin finishes the install of the portlights, Steve works on the outside instrument panel that will live on the rear of the housetop. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing, and check the description below for details on how you can become one of our key supporters on Patreon.
All right, so what I have going on right now is installing this interior port light, little vent for the head. So that'll sit up here, and when you open it, it'll draw in air from outside, push through with a fan into the head, and then hopefully out that port light. This is the circle that I need to cut out. Here's my router setup, just with a screw going in. This rotates around, keep us nice and true. And yeah, wish me luck. There are some voids in this plywood, so there's a little hole here and there's another one down in here, so I'm going to fill that with some Fixo epoxy, and we'll let that dry and then get this all mounted up hopefully tomorrow. So looks like some of these voids, I don't know who is doing quality control, but there's some voids here in the plywood, so they must have taken a day off that day. I like this visual. You can see the resin and the hardener mixing in the tip. That's pretty sweet.
In the background, you can hear Steve working with Scott, who you'll meet soon, on the butterfly hatch going on the housetop. Progress is being made with more hands in the shop, and that help is possible thanks to you, our supporters, and from the sponsor of today's video, Husk Knives.
This is the Husk knife. It is a Japanese-inspired knife for cooking, camping, outdoor activities. It's made out of high-quality stainless steel. It comes pretty sharp out of the box, sharp enough to slice tomatoes for our sandwiches. It's got a hole for your finger and a little notch for your other finger, so got quite a bit of control over it. It's currently 70% off. They're running a promotion. There's a link in the bio if you're interested. It's a 30-day money-back guarantee. The Husk knife has been handy and it's found its place in the boat and on the workbench. And you always need a sharp blade in a shop and something that you can cut a donut with or sharpen a pencil, open a package. And the Husk knife has been a great workhorse for that. And Husk says that these knives are such good stainless steel that it'll dull slowly and you won't even notice it getting dull, and it holds an edge for a really long time. I feel like this is always the test. Can you cleanly cut through a sandwich?
Came out pretty good.
Yeah. It's been so great to have some help in the boathouse. KP is still recovering, but they are not in good enough physical shape to come in and work in the shop yet. But Adin has started. He's been working on portlights and electrical, getting a bunch of that stuff done. And Scott just started, and he's getting his feet underneath him, so we'll meet him real soon. And then there's even more help coming. So Satchel and Ross will be in here in less than a month, and Satchel's gonna really spearhead getting a lot of the electrical systems hooked up and connected. So before we can get them hooked up and connected, we need them in their homes, and that's what I've been working on. So the project right now is the navigation on top of the house here. So eventually there's gonna be a bimini or a dodger that comes over the companionway opening and over this nav. So it'll be pretty protected, and you can't see most of the nav gear from the cockpit. You have to be right here and looking at the right angle to see it. So having some stuff up on deck where we can see it while we're steering is going to be really beneficial. Our propane tank is going to go here, and we've got a brass or bronze plate that opens up there so that you can reach in from the inside and manually shut off the propane. So there's going to be a little box that gets built in here. So after a whole bunch of renditions of taller and shorter and playing around with this, I got this mocked up out of a bunch of scrap wood and been working on building it actually out of cherry because we're not going to use plywood for it, believe it or not. And along with the nav that we put up here, we also need homes for the readout for the Nanny diesel. And don't let these wires fool you. It's actually a tiny little panel for the fuel filter readout. So I was thinking initially of mounting these up here, which is why this is so long. And the Nanny diesel would go there. And the little filter guy would be this little square up here. But it makes this panel pretty big. And I decided to make that panel smaller and mount these in the aft end of the cockpit, which is about where you are viewing from right now, and put them on a little box back there, as well as the diesel throttle. And that way all the diesel controls and things are together. And you don't really need to be staring at these unless you're running the diesel. And even then, you don't really need to be staring at them. You just need to be able to see them and check on them. So I think that'll work out. And that makes this whole thing actually come in quite a bit smaller. And that's part of the reason to mock it all up and spend some time playing with it, because I don't really want to get it all made out of cherry and decide that I hate it. Really want to try to get this as close as we can first try.
All right, be careful, don't fall.
I would say I'd never fall, but that's not true. I actually almost always fall. But it always turns out that I don't injure myself and it's super fun, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't always do that.
But most of the time, it's
One
a good
time I
time.
fall and I was riding with sneakers on my bike and the pedal crushed my foot.
Oh.
That was the worst wheelie of my life. Okay. This is probably the worst port light of my life. And again, I haven't done many port lights in my life other than shining them up on the buffing wheel. Bumpity. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. What? No, it's just the top again.
No.
Ugh. Okay. Can you give it a go? I'll film.
Yes.
Here's the thing.
Where did we get to?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
They weren't getting anywhere. Really. What?
That was pretty good. We got it out.
Wait, we did?
Yeah.
Jeez, I wasn't looking. Come on, I can see you through the camera though. This is fun.
Boom. Finished.
That's pretty nice.
Good job, Aaron. This is the cubby for the propane locker, and all of our portholes are in, and they work great. Aaron got them polished up, and they look super nice. We pulled out this rubber gasket, and we'll get some new rubber to put in there. But they're wonderful. And it's nice for right now. It'll help keep our heat inside the boat. And the butyl slowly starting to squeeze out more and more. And I'm sure by the time the warm weather comes, we'll just keep ratcheting down the screws every once in a while. And give the glass a good clean. So our last task for these port lights is to put this outer ring on. Now it's not really structural, it's more for aesthetics. And you can see, you just have to cinch it down to the curvature of the boat. Excuse the table saw. And so for these outer rings, we're putting some butyl on the back side of them. And Before we put them on, we're shoving extra butyl in if there's any cracks around here, and just really loading up these port lights with the butyl. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, poor days.
So one of the things with a traditional boat like Arabella is they didn't really design any cockpit storage. So they didn't have a navigation like this that would go on deck. And if you look at a lot of modern boats, there's little nooks and cubbies for things like binoculars or flare gun or a VHF radio, your hat, your sunglasses, a jacket, water bottle, that kind of thing. So as I've been designing and building this, I'm trying to build in some little storage nooks and cubbies so that we can keep things on deck, because this will be underneath the Bimini or Dodger, so it'll be pretty protected in here. And what we got going on is a Dorade box that's getting built into the nav area. So the Dorade is part of the ventilation for the boat. So if it's bad weather and you have to have the port lights closed up or you're leaving the boat for a while, you want to make sure that you still get airflow. And that's what these cowl vents are for. And how these work is you have your vent in the top, so air can come in or out of here. And there will be a pipe that gets mounted here that comes down to about this low. And there will be holes cut in the corners to let the water out. So in theory, if you were to dump a bunch of water into the vent here, the pipe would distribute it down at the very bottom of the box where it would go out of the scuppers. And this dam back here keeps that water, as does the pipe, from being able to travel up and over and into the boat. And you can also put a pipe on this side that comes up even higher than the dam, almost all the way up to the top. And that'll make this really unlikely to get any water through it. The farther you make the pipes, the taller you make the wall, the less water intrusion you're likely to get. At the same time, the less airflow you're going to get. So it's a toss-up. Since this one's going to be under the Dodger and on the housetop towards the aft end of the boat, this one shouldn't see the same amount of water that the fore ones will on the house. So I'm making this dam fairly low, and I'll make these pipes pretty short, and air on the side of more airflow in this one. And if this one did leak for some reason, it's right over the galley, which is a fine spot for it to do some dripping. So since we're building the navigation box, it seemed to make sense to build the Dorade right into it. And that's why the Dorade, or that's why the cowl vent is set low in the Dorade. So normally this would be a flat top that you would have the vent mounted on. But I create a bit of a nook here so that you could put some things while you're out sailing or living or sitting at dock, and have a little cubby space. You can add some little brass rails on there if we want to make that taller, depending on how we end up using it. Now the main panel part here, this hollow, which we can adjust with the depth of this, is for the electronics to sit in because they all get flush mounted and they need space in that back for the wires. And we'll put a pipe through here that goes down through the house that's all sealed up. So if water does get in there, it has to go over the pipe to get into the boat. And then this front panel here will lift out. This will all stay. So this will lift straight up and out. And that will show you all of the nav gear that's mounted here on the panel. And then when you don't need the nav gear, you can slide it back in and keep everything protected and out of the sun, because the sun will eventually eat up the panels and eat up the plastic. UV's quite a monster. I oriented the Dorade box running fore and aft with the intent of, when this is finished, adding some boards or some slats across the corner, and that gives you a really nice big cubby here that you could stick binoculars in, or a jacket, something somewhat substantial, which will be a really nice storage space, I think, on deck. And I went pretty simple. This is put together with box joints or finger joints. If you had more time on your hands and felt inclined, you could certainly do dovetails. But for this, the box joint is plenty strong enough, and I think looks fine. Didn't think it was worth the extra time and energy of cutting dovetails. I can cut these quite quickly on the table saw, which is nice. And we've got one more joint to mark out and cut. So this board, I marked out our fingers and cut them on the table saw, and I just made them 1.5, which worked out fairly well and left me with one kind of short one at the bottom. You can divide these kind of however you want. You can make tons of little fingers. These are about as big as I would go with this kind of stock. There's definitely some wiggle room. You can do big ones and small ones. People do all sorts of stuff. But trying to keep it a little simple here. So I can cut these and not be too excruciatingly careful about the lines. It doesn't matter much because the next one is where it really matters. All right, so we're gonna line this up. And you can see these fingers are overhanging a little bit, which is a lot nicer than having them shy. That's very easy to clean up and plane off after this is all glued up. And I'm just going to mark our openings. And now we got to make sure we remove the right stock. This is where, if you go too quickly, you end up cutting out the wrong thing. So where these fingers are, we need to make disappear. So that all needs to go, and we want to leave our lines. Square those down the front, we'll be ready for the table saw.